Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Football Baron podcast. Today we go over Chelsea and the Crystal Palace game where it was intense and fought till the last minute, as well as Arsenal versus Leicester City, which was also similar where it was intense and fought till the last minute, with Arsenal unfortunately only getting a draw from the game. Alongside some of the Manchester City dominant games that occurred, with Manchester City winning 5-0 against Newcastle and Liverpool winning 3-1 against Brighton. Alongside, of course, our wonder kid to watch for this episode of the Football Baron podcast. All right, let's start off with the Tottenham versus Everton game, which was, let's be honest, very boring game to watch. Tottenham, there was a couple fights with Tottenham players, Heung-min Son and Hugo Lloris, when Heung-min Son, right before the end of the first half, he lost the ball, or one of the players lost the ball, and he didn't chase after the ball and contest it, and then the Everton players took that opportunity, and the ball reached Richarlison, who got a shot in the box, and it was just wide of the goal. But Hugo Lloris was upset with Son about that, and to a degree, rightfully so, and not even to a degree, he was right that he had to run towards the ball and not just give up right away, which he did. And of course, it led to a fight. But of course, they dealt with it later. And I do think it should be good. I think it's good that they're trying to make other players accountable for what they're doing, and I think that's great in terms of just the team mentality. But it's also potentially can go awry if it leads to more just chemistry issues in terms of just players starting not to like each other and just not overall strong chemistry. But it doesn't look like that so far, so no, not trying to make any assumptions. But Tottenham, they did edge out with a 1-0 scoreline, with Giovanni Lo Celso shooting, taking a shot in the first half, I believe, and it deflecting off Keane, a Evertonian defender, where it went into the goal. But overall, let's be honest, a very disappointing performance from both teams. They didn't really show any commitment. It was clear to see to many people, and you can, if you just watch the game, or if you have watched the game, you can see there was no commitment from any of the Tottenham or Evertonian players. And Ancelotti, I believe, even said that like he recognizes how they just didn't play with really full emotion, and I think it's pretty clear to see. But overall, Everton and Spurs, if they're going to look to have higher ambitions of winning something, then they need to show that commitment. Another important game, of course, was Watford versus Norwich. Watford winning out with 3 solid points, which they desperately need in this relegation battle, where they can further themselves from that drop zone. But Watford looking very stellar and scoring 2 goals against Norwich, who scored 1. Norwich sinking down further into the relegation pile and looking further, looking potentially and most likely going into the championship next season. Chelsea versus Crystal Palace. Now, this was the game that I liked the most, and throughout of the 5 games that we're going to be talking about in the podcast, or we have talked about, I think that this Chelsea versus Crystal Palace game is the best one by far. Chelsea, solid play from Christian Pulisic for the second goal, just amazing shot, and then Wilfried Zaha responding quite soon after with a shot from way outside the box, and it just hurls in, and Kepa just can't save it. And just, my goodness, that was a beautiful shot. If you haven't seen it, please watch. And just incredible from him. And then another goal came from Chelsea, with Tammy Abraham scoring a goal which was meant to be a pass, but overall it was nice. He brought himself back on the score sheet, and later we got a response from Crystal Palace with Benteke scoring, and overall I think really strong from Crystal Palace. And in the last couple of minutes, you can see just how Crystal Palace were just getting absolutely hammered in the early beginning of the game. But then they started to change that momentum, and near the end of the second half, you could just see how Chelsea were just getting battered. They were just waiting for the referee to blow the whistle. And in the end, they did and got those 3 points. But very unfortunate from Crystal Palace. And if you just saw the scoreline, you would just say, oh, Chelsea won. But Crystal Palace in that game looked amazing. And I think that they should receive praise for what they did. And Chelsea should be lucky that they even got 3 points and not a draw as the outcome. Now, one thing to look at from the Chelsea versus Crystal Palace game, one specific player, Jorginho, the Italian defensive midfielder, just midfielder, very impressive what I saw from him. Now, Billy Gilmore, the Scottish wonder kid, he looks incredible on what his previous performances. He had he earned a starting spot on the team, but he was later subbed off when Crystal Palace was trying to push pressure on Chelsea. Now Jorginho, he stabilized it when he got on the pitch. He's getting a lot of passes in, a lot of touches in, and controlling the ball, helping Chelsea stabilize when they were looking very shaky and where they were conceding the ball to Crystal Palace. Now, the first 5 minutes, I believe, he only messed up one pass, which is with the amount of passes you could see from him when he was subbed on, it was incredible. Just really keeping the game more calm and in the favor of Chelsea. Now, I think that Jorginho, there are reports that he's potentially going to move to Juventus, and I heard from the commentators, Jamie Carragher or Gary Neville, I believe, saying that that there was reports that Chelsea was not having or enjoying the relationship that they had with his agent, who was trying to stir up transfer talk, and that led to them potentially benching him. And I think that is unfortunate, but I do think that if Chelsea are going to look to continue to maintain that top four, because currently they're number 3 right now with Leicester at number 4, but if Chelsea are going to keep the look and maintain that, I think Jorginho is looking stellar. Billy Gilmore is a great player. Don't get me wrong. He looks like he has a lot of potential, and he could truly become a great player. But Jorginho needs more minutes because what he did in that Chelsea versus Crystal Palace game is important for Chelsea. He helped stabilize them defensively and made sure that they calmed down. Unfortunately, they did concede a goal later on, and they were starting to still put pressure on, but I don't think that's just pinpointing it on him. But overall, good from him. And I think that can help with Chelsea in finishing off the season well. If he's going to be transferred, that's fine. They have enough money to find a replacement. But if they're gonna look to finish the season strong, they need to give Jorginho more minutes. I think it'll help with their defensive weaknesses that is clear in Chelsea's game, and just overall stabilize them, which he did in that Crystal Palace game for the most part. And still, Jorginho, great player and great performance for him in the Chelsea versus Crystal Palace game, coming in 20-30 minutes later and near the end of the game and putting in a solid performance. Not something you always see from a substitute. Arsenal versus Leicester City. Now, this game was pretty solid, I think, from Arsenal. Going into the game, I thought that Leicester City would be favorites because I really did think that from the performance that they got from Crystal Palace, where they won 3-0, Jamie Vardy scored 2 goals, getting him back into that groove. I thought that he would, light up again against Arsenal, and Leicester City would, in the end, win against an Arsenal side that I'm still skeptical about in terms of just how they play. But it turned out that Arsenal put in a even far better performance than Leicester City did. Leicester City was looking on some moments better in the first half, but Arsenal overall, just the way they're playing under Arteta is incredible, and they just were on the front foot. And Saka coming in and just a beautiful pass to Aubameyang, who just from that pass, that assist from Saka, he could easily just tap it in and score, giving Arsenal a 1-goal lead. But unfortunately, later on in the game, Nketiah comes on to replace some of the players for Arsenal, including other players being subbed on. And he does a challenge which was considered foul play, and VAR confirmed that it was a red card. and he was sent off. Now, when Arsenal was put down to 10 men, you could see that momentum changing. We see that with many games when a team is down one man, like the opposition team is looking to get that result. And a result they did for Leicester City. They managed to get a goal with Jamie Vardy scoring again, 2 matches in a row, getting him back into that groove. Overall, they weren't able to get a win. Leicester City. I think Arsenal did well in just defending and stopping Leicester City from getting a win out of it because of all the hard work that they did, and unfortunately, due to a bad challenge, they lost a player and they were down one man. But overall, I think that Arsenal played way better, and I think that Arsenal is unlucky in only getting a draw from that game, and that Leicester City should be more fortunate and they could have gotten a win, but Arsenal held it up and stopped Leicester from getting that win. But overall, strong performance from Arsenal. Now, speaking about Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, incredible what he's doing at Arsenal. I was skeptical. I mean, he's only 38. He doesn't have that much experience, except he's an assistant manager, or was an assistant manager, excuse me, at Manchester City under Pep Guardiola. But overall, what he's doing is quite impressive. Now, I've heard talk that under players like Mustafi, Zoltan Mustafi, under Arteta, he looks far better, more solid in his play, his defensive play. And you see players such as Aubameyang looking more dedicated. Their old self is more clear to see. You can see that passion again, and I think that Aubameyang sees what his future is at Arsenal, because Arteta is really shaping the club into a solid overall outlook. But I don't think he will be getting that much money. I think he would be lucky if he got money in the transfer window for him to bring in players. I think he'll have to work with some of the youngsters and the more experienced players that he has. I think that's why he wanted David Luiz to sign a contract extension, now looking back on it. But overall, I think he's looking like a strong future for Arsenal. You can see that with, of course, as I said, Mustafi and Aubameyang looking more dedicated. Also, the youngsters that he's playing, specifically players such as Saka, who signed a new contract, making him stay at the club longer. I think that's very beneficial for Arsenal in terms of just getting those key youngsters signed in the long term, and if they fulfill their potential, they can be a positive component in Arsenal's long-term and future success. Another player I think should be highlighted, another part of Arsenal that should be highlighted, is Kieran Tierney. Now, Tierney, I think there's a lot of expectations with him coming from Celtic to Arsenal on a pretty big money move for his age. Now, he's a pretty good defender, but I think what many of you, or for those of you who don't know, is that he experienced a lot of injury problems that just sidelined him for so much of the season, and sometimes for the entire season. I think that's really been just hampering down on his development as a player, and him just truly developing to what the potential, such a high ceiling he has. Now, you could see him in that Leicester City game just defending very well against Leicester City attackers, and also just overall going quite forward and crossing a lot, really spurring on some Arsenal attacks. I think that the synergy between him and some of the more Arsenal attacking players such as Aubameyang, Lacazette, Saka, all those is still developing. I mean, he doesn't play that many games with them because he's been injured quite often. But I think slowly you could see him becoming a very solid player. And you could see that he was somebody to look out for just in that game. And Scotland has two amazing left backs, including Tierney, and that's Andrew Robertson as well. And I can see Andrew Robertson, part of Andrew Robertson in Tierney. I think Tierney has a higher ceiling than Andy Robertson. But through Tierney, I could see that him just running forward, it's so similar to Robertson, just running forward ahead of the defenders, and getting those crosses in, just not a lot of those crosses into the box for his fellow teammates. And I think he's looking like he's gonna have a great future, and he could be a top class player for Arsenal, and definitely somebody that Mikel Arteta could look for in a future Arsenal team. So somebody that he can look to build look to be a part of a build for a new Arsenal team, built for success. And I think him and Mikel Arteta, if Arteta is seeming and looks to be as great as a coach as he is, then he could really develop Tierney into a solid and great player. Man City putting in a solid performance against Newcastle United, winning in a 5-0 scoreline. I think that's solid from Man City, poor from Newcastle. Newcastle, I still have no idea if they're going to be if there's a takeover going on. I mean, just how it's going back and forth between the likes of Newcastle and the Premier League and the British government. It's just very confusing, and I I feel bad for the Newcastle supporters because of just all the problems that's going around with them not really knowing. But still, a solid performance from Man City, winning 5-0. Kevin De Bruyne winning man of the match, just as expected. Just a great, amazing player. And I think that's great from him. Another game that showed up was Liverpool versus Brighton. Liverpool winning in a 3-1 scoreline. Mohamed Salah being the man of the match, scoring 2 goals. And it should have been 1 assist, but a defender got a slight touch to it. He passed the ball to Henderson, who scored it. A goal, lovely goal, great technique. And overall, solid from Liverpool. They did look, of course, shaky on the defensive side. They conceded a goal. There was a unique player on the pitch, Nico Williams, Liverpool youngster, and I think he did a great job in terms of just overall performances defending and how he did some solid blocks and overall tackles when Brighton was getting into the box and trying to take their chances. But overall, good from him, considering that he's a right back and he played left back to cover for Andy Robertson. Robertson came on in the second half for him, but still impressive from Nico Williams, looking solid overall from that game. All right, a side topic I want to focus on is, of course, the water breaks. Now, when the Premier League was getting the restart, they said that they were going to implement water breaks. Basically, it's going to split the game into quarters instead of 2 halves now, with the water break going on in the middle of first half and second half. Now, I think initially it was a great idea because you could see that the players needed it in some cases. Just overall, their fitness wasn't the same with that long break that they had due to the coronavirus. And when they got that water break, it helped them just continue the match. And I think it was a good decision to just reduce amount of injuries. And we even saw it in the Man City versus Arsenal game. When the restart happened, you just saw a lot of Arsenal players specifically going down injured, and we saw a couple of Man City players going down injured as well. But overall, I think it was a good choice in the beginning. But now looking at the water breaks, I think you look at the Everton versus Tottenham game. When the water break happened, the coaches were instantly out there and started giving instructions. And some commentators like Gary Neville were saying that it's more of a tactical break, and I think that is true, that it is a tactical break, and it needs to be stopped. The purpose of the water break was entirely intended to help the players just get used to the Premier League and playing 90 minutes matches, 45-minute halves, and just overall get them back in the groove and prevent injuries from such high athletic requirements when they've been on a 2-3 month break due to the coronavirus. But now that it seems like it's just a time, it's changing the game, how the game is being played with coaches and managers being able to give advice and instructions in those little 2-3 minutes, and it really breaks up the flow of the game. And I don't think it's good for certain teams. I think for certain teams, and I think it's great for other teams in terms of. I think it's best for teams who are on the back foot, and it's worse for teams on the front foot because it just breaks up the play, and the opposition coach or manager whose team is getting battered on, they can just use that as an opportunity to really get their team back into focus. And I don't think it's a good idea. And I think now that they're playing more games and that the players are looking more physically sharp, that it's time that those breaks be removed. For this episode, we will be going over the wonder kid to watch. Now, we introduced this last podcast where we talked about Mason Greenwood as the wonder kid to watch from his stellar performance against Bournemouth. But this episode, we're going to be talking about Anthony Gordon the Evertonian wonderkid, local Liverpool lad, and I think he has a lot of potential and overall just a great solid future ahead of him. Now, he's been playing more games under Ancelotti, and you can really see Ancelotti trust him as a youngster. And here's what he said. First of all, he has a lot of technical skills. He can combine this with a good physical condition and resistance, and so I think he has no problem to play as a midfielder. I put him when he started to train with us on the left side. He did really well, but I also think he can play as a number 10. In the final third, he has a lot of ability. I have patience. All the players who come from the academy are really important for us. Now, you can see when he's talking about how he can play as a midfielder on the left and as a number 10, he's quite a good playmaker. And I think that versatility as a youngster is quite incredible. And just looking at Anthony Gordon in certain games, such as against Tottenham, you can see his talent. And he's only 19, so he still has much to learn, but he has that quality and ability at such a young age. Now, I think he's definitely somebody to watch for Everton. Now that Everton has a top class manager in Ancelotti, and them potentially looking to invest in Ancelotti with money being spent in the transfer window, I think that Anthony Gordon can be a strong key feature. Just as Alexander Arnold was for Everton's rival club Liverpool, he was a rising star and has put a massive impact, has made a massive impact for Liverpool. I think that Anthony Gordon can do the same for Everton, and I think it's easier for him to break into that Evertonian squad, and I think that the potential and the skill that you see in his play at only 19 against other Premier League players is quite incredible, and I think he has a great solid future ahead of him with Carlo Ancelotti, a great manager who can definitely lead him on the right track and really help him reach the potential that Anthony Gordon has. Well, that will be our last segment with the Wonder Kid to watch. I want to thank you all for watching this episode of the Football Baron podcast. Thank you again for watching. And of course, if you want to follow, subscribe on any podcast platform that you're listening to, that would be quite appreciated. And please give it 5 stars. And if you are on YouTube or would like to go to YouTube, Football Baron is our YouTube channel name. You can see our podcast in a YouTube format, as well as smaller clips and smaller segments for you to watch. And if you can subscribe to us on YouTube, that'd be great. And go to our Instagram, Football Barons, and our Twitter, Baron_football. Just for all our content, thank you again for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.